Football is constantly changing, be it through the introduction of VAR or having to pay $14.95 to watch a Premier League game. So much has changed about the beautiful game on and off the pitch over the past year. But none of these changes have been as controversial as the new handball rules. But what are these new handball rules in the Premier League, and why are so many people outraged by their implications on the game? At its core, the laws for what is and is not a handball are still the same as they were last season. As it's always been in football, if the ball strikes an outfield player's hand, it's a handball, be it due to the player raising their hands above their shoulder, like Neil Maupay against United, or a much more sinister handball, like Luis Suarez against Ghana. Players having the ball strike their arm when their arms are clearly away from their body will result in the player being penalised. The recent rule change comes from the International Football Association Board, IFAB. They made a decision to change the interpretation of the current handball laws for the new Premier League season. As stated by the Premier League at the start of the season, the boundary between the shoulder and the arm is now defined as the bottom of the armpit. As illustrated on the screen, match officials will only penalise a player if there is clear evidence of the ball striking a player's arm below the bottom of the armpit, as shown by the red zone. The IFAB also reiterated that if the ball hits the player who has made their body unnaturally bigger, then a foul will be awarded. The IFAB deem a hand or arm above shoulder height as rarely a natural position, the only exception to this being when a player is falling. Lastly, they also stated that there will be extra leeway permitted for ricocheted handballs when the ball comes off a nearby player first, or if the player who committed the handball cannot see the ball. Now, these do not seem like major changes at face value, but given what we have seen so far, this tightening of the rules has had a huge impact on the Premier League thus far. We have already seen a few controversial handball penalties given despite it being so early on in the season. Dyer's handball was given against Newcastle, even though he was unaware of where the ball was. Lindelof's handball against Palace was in close proximity to the player, but was overruled by the unnaturally bigger concept. And Doherty's handball against Southampton was a ricochet from close range, and the penalty was still given. Under the new stipulations, it's hard to see why any of these were awarded as penalties. All of the incidents were clearly accidental, yet that was not taken into consideration by the officials. The neglect to consider intent and advantage gained by the player is the main cause for outrage at this new handball rule. The eye test and the stats tell you the same story. By game week 3 of this season, 20 penalties had already been awarded, of which 30% were due to handball offences. For context, since 2006, the highest percentage of handball penalties was 21.1% back in the 08-09 season. Whilst 3 games is a small sample size, the statistics suggest that the new handball rules have played a part in this rise in handball penalties. If continued at this rate, the fabric of the game could be compromised. Steve Bruce, Roy Hodgson and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer have already publicly spoken against the new rule in post-match press conferences, and Jamie Carragher was infuriated after the Dyer handball. He said, "Whoever is involved in this, stop it. It's a disgrace and it's ruining football. This outrage from fans, pundits and managers has led to the IFAB claiming they will soften their stance on these new rules. Whether this will hold true and to what level is yet to be seen." It is still early days in the season, but with all the outrage over the new handball rules, the pressure will be on the IFAB to amend them correctly. The new law will possibly allow for more leeway on handballs that do not lead to direct scoring opportunities or give the opposition a clear advantage. Because the obvious issue with this rule is the microscope for error that it holds over a free-flowing game.